भवति भारत अभ्युत्थानम् अधर्मस्य तदात्मानं सृजाम्यहम्.
The epic Mahabharata loudly proclaims to humanity, whatever you see in this world can be seen here, but whatever is not seen here, you won't see anywhere else. The world glorifies Mahabharata as the Panchama Veda, that is the fifth Veda. It is this scripture which has enlightened us that in the conflict between dharma and adharma, righteousness and unrighteousness, undoubtedly the victory shall be of the dharma, the righteous. This great epic is richly laden with 18 parvas, that is chapters, which comprise more than 1 lakh verses. Knitted with stories and sub-stories, this colossal epic encompasses all aspects of knowledge. Hence, it is also called as Jaya, which means victory. The epic which describes the history of Kuru clan, Kuru Vamsha, begins with the pronouncement, "Nothing happens in this world without a reason." Yes, the whole universe awaited the birth of the bravest and the strongest warriors of all time, Devavrata. In the snow-clad Himalayan mountains was a small ashram where lived Lord Vasishtha, one of the 7 great rishis. And he had with him Nandini, the divine cow Kamadhenu's daughter. Nandini was also a miraculous cow who could give everything one asks for. One day, Ashtavasus planned to steal Nandini from Lord Vasishtha. Ashtavasus are the 8 elemental gods. But they were caught in the act, and Lord Vasishtha got so angry that he cursed the Ashtavasus to have human birth. They repented for their action and begged him to relieve them of the curse. Goddess Ganga felt pity for them and blessed them to be born as her sons. And she also promised to give them salvation, that is moksha, from the saint's curse. After a few years, the prince of Hastinapur, Shantanu, went for hunting in the forests. He happened to see a beautiful lady amidst the woods. He got so mesmerized by her beauty that he wished to marry her. He went and told her his desire. She said she was ready to be his queen, but only on one condition, that he would never question any of her actions. The king gave her his word. Soon a child was born to them, but the queen threw the child to the river Ganga. As the king had promised not to question her actions, he dared not to ask. This continued, and she abandoned all 7 of her children by throwing them into the river Ganga. When the queen was about to do the same to her 8th child too, King Shantanu, not able to bear this, stopped her. It was then she revealed that she was Goddess Ganga, and she was doing so to give moksha, that is salvation, to the 8 Vasus. As the king had broken his promise, the queen disappeared with their 8th child. Years passed by. One day, the king was near the Ganges and he was astonished to see a young boy controlling the flow of the river just with his arrows. Goddess Ganga manifested before the king and told him that it was his own son known as Devavrat. The king happily invited him to his castle.
Om Shri Sai Ram. Bhishma. King Shantanu made Devavrat the crown prince and ruled the kingdom. A few years passed. One day, the king went for hunting in the woods near the river Yamuna. He was driven by a divine smell and went in search of its origin. He found out that the smell was coming from a very beautiful fisher lady named Satyavati, who was blessed by Parashara Maharshi. He was so attracted to her that he wished to marry her. When the king approached her father, Dashapramuka, with this wish, he said that he would allow them to marry only if the king promised to make Satyavati's children heirs to the throne. King Shantanu was very upset with this and he did not wish to make that choice because of his noble son Devavrat. He headed back to Hastinapur with a heavy heart. Young Devavrat noticed that his father was very upset with something. When he got to know the reason behind that, he went straight to the woods and met the king of the fishermen, Dashapramuka. He requested on behalf of his father. The skeptical Dashapramuka asked, what if Devavrat's children and Satyavati's children fight with each other for the throne in the future? Devavrat, being a devoted son, proclaimed that he would remain a celibate for the rest of his life. Hearing this powerful promise from him, the gods and goddesses showered flowers on him and he was named Bhishma, one who makes a promise and keeps it. Thereafter, Bhishma took Satyavati to Shantanu at Hastinapur. Years passed and the kingdom was ruled by Chitrangat and Vichitravirya, children of Shantanu and Satyavati. Vichitravirya had a son by Ambika, who became the father of the Kuru clan Dhritarashtra, and another son Pandu by Ampalika, who later became the father of the Pandavas. Jai Sai Ram.
Om Shri Sai Ram. Chitrangada, the eldest son of Satyavati, had a fight with Gandharva and he lost his life in it. After that, his brother Vichitravirya became the king of Hastinapura. As Vichitravirya was very young, Bhishma represented the king. When Vichitravirya reached his adulthood, he was ready to get married. During this time, Bhishma heard about a Swayamvara at Kashi. Amba, Ambika and Ambalika, daughters of the king of Kashi, were very beautiful young women. They were anxious about their Swayamvara. Bhishma defeated all the kings who had assembled for the Swayamvara and brought Amba, Ambika and Ambalika to Hastinapura. Soon, arrangements were made for the marriage between King Vichitravirya and 3 princesses of Kashi. Amba came up and informed Bhishma about her love for King of Salva and they planned to get married. Bhishma, with all due respect, sent Amba to King Salva with all protection and security. Unfortunately, Salva refused to accept Amba as his wife. Deeply pained, she returned to Hastinapura and proposed marriage to Bhishma. As Bhishma had pledged lifelong celibacy, he could not accept her proposal. Amba was helpless and furious. She blamed Bhishma for her tragic situation. Her hatred towards Bhishma made her want to kill him. She even approached many kings asking them to kill Bhishma. Due to their fear for Bhishma, they refused to help Amba. She found that all her efforts were in vain. At last, she did penance to please Lord Subramanya. Pleased with the devotion, the Lord appeared and gave Amba a garland of lotus which would never wither and said that the one who puts on the garland would become Bhishma's enemy. Amba approached many Kshatriya warriors with the divine garland, but nobody would help her out. As a last resort, she reached Drupada's palace. When she explained him the purpose of her visit, Drupada too turned her down and sent her out. With deep sadness and anger, Amba walked out of the palace, and while leaving, she dangled the divine garland on a door in the palace. As Amba sat dejectedly in the forest, a group of sages inquired about her distress. They suggested her to approach Parashurama, who was Bhishma's guru. Amba approached Parashurama, and in order to pacify her, Parashurama and Bhishma battled against each other. But to Amba's shock, Bhishma defeated Parashurama. Revengeful Amba went directly to Himalayas, resolved to practice severe penance. Through intense austerities, she pleased Lord Shiva, and when he appeared, she prayed for a boon, that is, to bless her to be born as a man to avenge Bhishma. After that, she made a funeral pyre and jumped into it to end her life. With the blessings of Lord Shiva, she was reborn as Drupada's daughter. The divine lotus garland, which was hung on a door in Drupada's palace by Amba, was still there. Many years later, Drupada's daughter wore the garland herself. When Drupada got to know about this, he feared Bhishma would come for him and his daughter. So he sent her away to forest. Drupada's daughter did penance in the forest and pleased the Gandharvas. With their blessings, she turned to a young man named Shikhandi. She was the one who accompanied Arjuna in the great Kurukshetra war and defeated Bhishma. When Bhishma could not go against the dharma of picking up a weapon against women. Hence, he simply stood without fighting when Shikhandi appeared in front of him during the war. That moment, Arjuna and Shikhandi used their arrows to defeat Bhishma. Let's tune ourselves to Bharata and wait for the 10th day of Kurukshetra war, where we can see in detail how Bhishma ended up in the bed of arrows created by the great warrior Arjuna. Jai Sai Ram. Om Shri Sai Ram. Chapter 4, Kacha and Devyani. Devas decided to send Kacha, the charming son of Brihaspati, to Shukracharya for becoming his disciple. The idea was to impress Devyani, daughter of Shukracharya, and to gain the knowledge of Mrita Sanjeevani through her. Mrita Sanjeevani is a mantra which has the power to bring a dead person back to life. With this aim in mind, Kacha approached Shukracharya and requested to admit him as his disciple. Seeing his virtuousness, Shukracharya admitted Kacha as his disciple. Kacha was very intelligent, and slowly Shukracharya and Devyani became very fond of him. Meantime, Asuras became aware of the secret intention of Kacha and tried to kill him. Every time they killed Kacha, Shukracharya revived him using Mrita Sanjeevani on the insistence of Devyani. Finally, Asuras burnt Kacha and mixed his ashes with alcohol and served it to Shukracharya. This time, Shukracharya could not use Mrita Sanjeevani to revive Kacha, and the only solution was to teach Mrita Sanjeevani to Kacha, who was in his stomach. Ultimately, Kacha became successful in his mission. Later, he decided to go back to heaven. That moment, Devyani stopped Kacha and proposed him for marriage. But since Shukracharya was his guru and Kacha came out of Shukracharya's stomach, Devyani was like a sister. So, Kacha politely refused to marry Devyani and went back to heaven. Jai Sai Ram. Om Shri Sai Ram. Chapter 5, Devyani's Marriage. Devyani, along with the daughters of Demon King Vrishaparva, went to take a bath in the river. Suddenly, a mighty wind blew, mixing up their clothes kept on the riverbank. Without paying attention, Sharmishta, one of the daughters, by mistake took Devyani's clothes instead of hers. Outraged by this act, Devyani shouted at Sharmishta. Feeling offended by this, she pushed Devyani into a well. Thereby, Sharmishta, being the demon princess, showed her identity with her uncontrolled anger. During this time, the great emperor of the Bharata dynasty, Yayati, was taking a walk through the forest. He happened to see Devyani stuck inside the well. Feeling sympathy for the girl, he gave a helping hand and pulled her out of the well. Holding hand, hand Pani, holding Grahani. Pani Grahanam in Sanskrit literally means giving life or marrying that person. Devyani interpreted this entire act as a marriage between them. She started arguing with Yayati, but Yayati tried to convince Devyani that their wedding would be against the laws laid by the caste system. Devyani being his guru's daughter, a Brahmin, and Yayati, a Kshatriya, their marriage would not be possible. Devyani could not accept this denial. She felt insulted and refused to move from where she was. Meanwhile, being worried about his daughter, Shukracharya sent a lady in search of Devyani. Devyani sent a message to her father, declaring that she won't be coming back to the palace until and unless a solution was found for her disgrace. Saddened by this act, Shukracharya himself went to bring back his daughter from the forest to the palace. He advised her and gave valuable messages. He also reminded her that one has to go through the effects of one's karma at any cost, and one cannot blame others for that. Enraged by this, Devyani abused her father as a praise bearer of the king. Disappointed by this allegation, Shukracharya dismissed it by giving examples of his greatness. He also added further advice to uplift his spirits. He told her, whoever bears the contempt from others patiently can conquer the world, and whoever becomes a victim of the anger of a person who never becomes angry will lose everything. But none of the advice had any effect on Devyani's thinking. She encountered her father's advice by quoting from the science of ethics. She said, "One who misbehaves is equivalent to a Chandala, and the wound that is caused by harsh words is more painful than the injury caused by weapons." Disappointed by this, Shukracharya decided to stay there with his daughter, and he sent a message to King Vrishaparva that he won't return to the palace without Devyani. Can a king rule the kingdom effectively without the royal preceptor? It would be tough to rule the kingdom in the absence of Rajaguru Shukracharya. So he understood that it was important to please Devyani and bring back Shukracharya to the palace. Thus, King, along with his family, went to the forest where Devyani was sitting to have negotiations with her. Devyani demanded that if Sharmishta, the princess, was ready to be her maid for the rest of her life, she would return to the palace. Without any other option left, Sharmishta agreed to be her maid. Devyani thus returned to the palace. Devyani and Yayati again met in the forest. Devyani requested Yayati to marry her. This time, Yayati approached Shukracharya for permission to marry Devyani. Shukracharya agreed and they both get married. Even though the marriage was against the caste rule, due to the permission given by Shukracharya, the marriage stood feasible. Devyani, along with her maid, went to her husband Yayati's palace. As time passed, the princess, by birth Sharmishta, requested Yayati to marry her, and Yayati agreed to it. They secretly got married without the knowledge of Devyani. After some time, Devyani came to know about this relationship and she was extremely furious. She went to her father Shukracharya and complained about this. Shukracharya was enraged and he cursed Yayati, "Let untimely aging come to you." Yayati was turned into an older man instantaneously. He cried for pardon and withdrawal of the curse. Shukracharya refused and said that a curse is a curse and cannot be revoked. He gave the only solution: Yayati can exchange the youthhood of another person for his old age. Jai Sai Ram.
Om Shri Sai Ram. Shukracharya's curse turned Yayati to an old man. Yayati begged Shukracharya to relieve him of the curse. He said, "The word once spoken cannot be taken back." Sympathizing with the king, the guru of the demons told Yayati, "If a young man is ready to swap ages with you, you can regain your youth." Not yet satisfied with the worldly pleasures, Yayati craved to be young again. He had 3 children by Devayani and 2 by Sharmishta. He approached them and asked if one of them would give up his youth for him. The first 4 sons refused to accept their father's request. The youngest son of Sharmishta, Puruvas, showed his willingness to take his father's old age so that his father could enjoy his youth. Yayati was so pleased to see his son's love for him. He promised Puru that he would return his youth after 1,000 years. Thus, Yayati became young again. Meanwhile, Puru was turned to be an old man. He engaged himself in chanting God's name and meditation. 1,000 years passed. Yayati was still not satisfied with the worldly pleasures. At the same time, he noticed that day by day his craving for pleasures was increasing. He realized that peace can be attained only by giving up one's desires. Back to his son, took back his old age in return. He then coronated Puruvas as a king and went to forest to engage himself completely in spiritual practices. Jai Sai Ram.
Om Shri Sai Ram. Chapter 7, Vidura. In this chapter, we will see how sage Mandavya's impalement led to the birth of Vidura. There lived a sage named Mandavya in a forest near the palace. One day, when he was sitting under a tree in deep contemplation, a band of robbers ran into his hermitage. They were being chased by the king's soldiers. Finding the hermitage a safe place, they hid their stolen goods there. The king's soldiers entered the hermitage, found the thieves, and discovered the stolen goods from there. When they questioned the sage, he kept quiet due to his vow of silence. So they mistook him also to be the robber and arrested him as well. The king was informed about this. The king had the sage and the thieves impaled on spikes. The thieves died, but the sage did not due to his spiritual power. When the sages in the neighborhood came to know about this, they informed the king about the innocence of sage Mandavya. Having known the truth, the king, with his retinue, came to the sage, prostrated before him, and apologized for the mistaken identity. However, the sage, though was convicted without any reason, did not have any ill feeling towards the king, as he felt that he was experiencing the consequence of some of his previous deeds. In order to know about this, he met Yamadharma. It's not Lord Yama, the Lord of death and justice, who enforces the law and decides the punishment for the wicked. Knowing the divinity of the sage, Lord Yama told him, "You have tortured insects and bees in your childhood. You have to face the consequences of any deed you have done, be it good or bad." Hearing this, the sage was shocked. He felt it was unfair of Yama to pass such a harsh judgment for a mistake done unknowingly when he was a child. He cursed Lord Yama to be born in the mortal world and experience the difficulties of a human. Thus, Yama was born as Vidura, the wise, to the servant maid of Ambalika with the blessing of sage Vyasa. None during that period was as well versed in all aspects of righteousness as Vidura. Knowing well about this, Bhishma appointed Vidura as the main advisor of Dhritarashtra.
Om Shri Sai Ram. Chapter 8. Kunti Devi. Pritha was the daughter of Ugrasena, who was the godfather of Shri Krishna. She was adopted by his childless brother Kunti Bhojan. From then on, she was known as Kunti. She was a very kind and helpful girl. Durvasa was very happy and pleased with the way she had treated him once. So, he blessed her with a special mantra. If she chanted this mantra and prayed to any god and wished for a child, she would be blessed with a child from that god. The intention behind giving this boon was that Durvasa, with his foresight, could predict that in future Kunti's husband King Pandu would have to face a curse and he would not have kids. So, to compensate that, Durvasa gave this boon. In order to test whether the boon would work, Kunti prayed to sun god and chanted the mantra. The boon worked and she became pregnant. She gave birth to Karna. As Kunti was an unmarried lady, she was afraid of the humiliation she would face by giving birth to a fatherless child. So, she desired to abandon the child by placing him in a box and leaving it in the river. The child floated away and was received by Adirath. He brought him up and later on he became the great warrior Karna. She was blessed by Surya Bhagwan and during Swayamvar she chose King Pandu as her husband. They both then moved to Hastinapur where they stayed together. Later on, with the help of Bhishmacharya, King Pandu married a lady named Madri. They all stayed together in Hastinapur. Jai Sai Ram.
Om Shri Sai Ram. Chapter 9. Dismissal of Pandu. Pandu lived a happy life with his wives Kunti and Madri in Hastinapur. Once, when Pandu went to the forest for a hunt, he unknowingly shot an arrow on a sage. The sage cursed Pandu before dying. Let's now see what was the curse and how this affected Pandu's family. Maharaj Pandu, who was very fond of hunting, went into deep trouble by shooting an arrow on a sage couple who played in the forest as deers. The sages cursed Pandu before dying that his head would blast into pieces if he touches his wives. With great grief, Pandu left his kingship and Hastinapur with his wives by giving over all the responsibilities to Bhishma. Maharshi Durvasa had blessed Kunti Devi with a knowledge of powerful mantra which helps to obtain children from desired god. Hence, Kunti Devi prayed to Yamadharmaraja to obtain Yudhishthira, Vayudeva to obtain Bhima, and Devendra to obtain Arjuna. She also taught Madri the same mantra and she obtained Nakula and Sahadeva from Ashwini Devas. They lived happily in the forest. Forgetting the curse, Pandu once touched Madri. He fell down immediately and died. Unbearable grief led Madri to jump on her husband's pyre. Kunti Devi, with her 5 sons, had to return to Hastinapur. Foreseeing the family conflicts that can happen in the future, Bhishma advised the old queens Satyavati, Ambika and Ambalika to go to forest to spend their time in penance. Thus, they renounced luxuries and comforts of the palace and left for the forest. Om Shri Sai Ram. Bhima. Bhima the second born of the Pancha Pandavas and the son of Vayudeva, the god of wind, is renowned for his physical strength of 10,000 elephants approximately and expertise in the martial art of using the mace. His description doesn't end here. He, being the major rival of Kauravas, had many a time become the victim of Duryodhana and his people's evil plots. In spite of it, they could not subdue him, as every time he would retaliate with more vigor and spirit. For Bhima, whether it was love or revenge, he would return only after seeing its end. This chapter ends offering salutations to this towering personality of strength in the Mahabharata. Om Shri Sai Ram, Chapter 11. The Pandavas and Kauravas learn arts from Kripacharya and Dronacharya. To showcase the exceptional talents of the princes in various martial art forms, he invites everyone. Duryodhana could not stand Arjuna showing his exemplary skills in archery. When Arjuna was declared an unbeatable warrior, a radiant young man entered, prostrated before all the acharyas and challenged Arjuna. He proclaimed that he could do everything better than Arjuna. Soon he proved it right and startled everyone with his skills. He wanted to have a duel with Arjuna. Guru Kripacharya was not ready to accept Karna's challenge without knowing who he was. The young Karna was hesitant to reveal his identity as he was the son of charioteer Athirath. He knew he could not be considered an equal as he was not a Kshatriya. All the acharyas presented over there declared only equals can fight. He was humiliated by this. Duryodhana decided to help Karna from his plight. He announced Karna as the king of one of his kingdoms and made him an equal. Karna was spellbound by such gracious act of Duryodhana and pledged a lifetime of loyalty towards him. He surrendered himself to be his aid at all times. Duryodhana was happy that he got one of the strongest warriors by his side. When Karna was young, he wanted to learn to use Brahmastra from Lord Parashuram, but he only taught Brahmins. In order to learn from him, Karna lied that he was a Brahmin. Eventually, Lord Parashuram learned the truth. He got furious and cursed Karna to forget whatever he learned when he needs it in the most. Duryodhana befriends Karna, unaware of this curse, while Kunti recognizes that Karna was her first son and watches all of this helplessly.
Om Shri Sai Ram, Dronacharya. The son of Bharadwaja Maharshi, Drona, in spite of being a Brahmin, was more interested towards the art of arms. He was friends with Drupada, the prince of Panchala. During their Gurukula days, Drupada had promised half of his kingdom for his friend. Drona grew up and got married to the sister of Kripacharya. They had a son named Ashwatthama. Once Lord Parashuram wanted to give away everything he had to the Brahmins. Hearing that, Drona also went to ask for something. But by the time Drona reached the Lord, he had nothing to offer. So Lord Parashuram desired to give him all his knowledge on the art of arms. On receiving that gift, Drona became one of the best in the art of arms. Years passed by. Drupada became the king of Panchala. Hearing that, Drona decided to visit the king to remind him and to ask his promised share of the kingdom. But the king had not only forgotten his promise, but also insulted Drona in front of the royal members. The shame was unbearable for Drona, and he wanted to teach Drupada a lesson. After the incident, Drona was living with his brother-in-law, Kripacharya, at Hastinapura. One day, the young princes of Hastinapura were playing in the outskirts. Suddenly, a ball and a ring happened to fall into a well from the hands of Udhishthira. Seeing the sad plight of the kids, Drona decided to help them. With his exceptional talent, he took the ball and the ring from the well. The princes were really surprised and awestruck. They told Bhishma about the incident. He understood right away that it was Drona. So, Bhishma invited Drona to the palace, paying all respects for teaching the princes of Hastinapur. Days passed by. The princes were taught everything, and as a customary practice, he asked them to give their guru his Guru Dakshina. The Guru Dakshina he had asked for was to bring a defeated King Drupada and offered him at his feet. Only Arjuna could provide this Guru Dakshina. Arjuna brought a chain to Drupada for Drona. Drona scorned Drupada and reminded him of the ill treatment he had to suffer at Drupada's palace years ago. Since he did not wish to hurt Drupada anymore, he let him go. Drupada could not stand the humiliation, and he waited for the right time to seek a revenge. He did high penance to get a son strong enough to kill Drona and a daughter to be married to Arjuna. Drishtadyumnan, the one who could kill Drona during Kurukshetra war, and Draupadi or Krishna, the wife of Pandavas, were born to him as a result of his penance. Jai Sai Ram. Om Shri Sai Ram. Episode 13, Arakillam. Recap. The Pandavas became exceptionally skilled warriors under the tutelage of Guru Dronacharya. Duryodhana was jealous of the exceptional talents of Bhima and Arjuna. He somehow wanted to get rid of the Pandavas and was constantly pondering over ways in which he could kill them. Arakillam. The Pandavas' fame and popularity was increasing day by day. Duryodhana considered that as a big threat for themselves. In order to stop that from happening, he wanted the Pandavas to be sent away from Hastinapur. Duryodhana, along with Shakuni and Karna, plotted against the Pandavas. They made King Dhritarashtra order Pandavas to leave for a place called Varanavrit, where Duryodhana assigned Purochana to build a palace for the Pandavas with highly inflammable materials. The palace was named Arakillam. Duryodhana had also asked Purochana to burn down the palace at night and kill Kunti Devi and the Pandavas. However, Vidura, their paternal uncle, got to know Duryodhana's heinous plan. He warned the Pandavas and devised a plan to escape from the palace. Once, Duryodhana asked his father Dhritarashtra to send the new prince to Varanavrit for annual festival. Dhritarashtra could not refuse Duryodhana, and he requested the eldest Pandava to visit the Varanavrit as his representative. All 5 Pandavas, along with their mother Kunti, reached Varnavrat. Meanwhile, Duryodhana sent Purochana to build a palace with highly inflammable materials and aptly named it as Lakshagriha. The palace was ready in time and Pandavas stayed in the same palace. However, the wise Vidura had sensed something wrong, so he inquired and sent a digger to dig a secret tunnel from Lakshagriha to a river. The tunnel digger reached Pandavas and offered to dig a tunnel for Pandavas. Thus, secretly, the work to save Pandavas began in Lakshagriha. After the work of tunnel digging was complete, Pandavas were looking to find an appropriate day to make their next move. The tunnel has been made carefully and Purochana was not aware that a tunnel exists at Lakshagriha. Pandavas invited the people for a feast. The feast was grand and everyone enjoyed it. After the feast, everyone left and Purochana was also sleeping. Seeing an opportune moment, Pandavas set the palace on fire. Then they used the tunnel dug earlier to escape from the burning palace. Bhima carried his mother and all his brothers through the tunnel. Purochana became a victim of his own design and was burnt while sleeping. On that fateful day, a Bhil woman with her 5 sons also came to banquet and somehow they also became the victim of the fire. Thus, by the foresight of Vidura, Pandavas escaped from the ill will of Duryodhana and Shakuni. When they reached the end of the tunnel, a boat was waiting for them at the banks of river Ganges. Thus, Pandavas successfully escaped to the deep forest on the other side of the river. While traveling, Vyasa Maharshi appeared before them and taught them the purpose of life and how it works. He instructed them to take the form of Brahmins and directed them to Ekachakrapura village. Jai Sai Ram. Om Shri Sai Ram. Vidura, who was the minister of Hastinapura, physically took Kaurava's side but emotionally and mentally supported Pandava. With his help, Pandava escaped Duryodhana's death trap and they left everything they owned and left to the forest. Vyasa Maharshi appeared to them and asked to go to a village called Ekachakrapura. Let's see what happens there. Mother Kundi and her sons stayed at a Brahmin's house at Ekachakrapura. They went house to house collecting alms. They survived there with what they had. Meanwhile, a cruel monster called Bhagasura attacked their village, terrorizing everyone. The king of Ekachakrapura could not find a solution and feared the monster. So he fled the village. Bhagasura killed people cruelly and fed on them. This was out of anyone's control and lots of people died. This led to make an agreement with Bhagasura. It said that every week one person from a family would take a bullock cart full of food, eatables and alcohol. Bhaga would eat the whole bullock cart along with the cows and the one who brought the food to him. Bhagasura would satisfy himself with this. All the houses took turns to do this. Every family started losing their dear ones like this. One day, it was the turn of the Brahmins who hosted Pandavas. They mourned about their dreadful fate. Listening to this, Kunti inquired the reason for their sorrow and came to know that it was their family's turn with Bhagasura. Kunti Devi consoled them, telling that she had 5 sons and that she would send one of them as a representative from the Brahmin's family. While Kunti Devi explained the situation to her sons, Bhima found the situation too exciting and willingly agreed to take up the task. Bhima took the bullock cart full of food and placed it in front of Bhagasura's cave. He loosened the cow from the cart and started to eat the food which is brought for Bhagasura. This angered Bhagasura and he attacked Bhima. In the fierce fight, Bhima killed Bhagasura without much effort and saved Ekachakrapura from a great fear. Jai Sai Ram.
Om Shri Sai Ram. Pandavas and their mother stayed happily at Ekachakrapura. They became aware of the Swayamvara ceremony which was arranged by King Drupada for his daughter Draupadi. She was also called as daughter of Panchal, Panchali. The Brahmins of surrounding areas were in joy as it was a tradition to seek blessings from Brahmins by offering them gifts. Hence, the Brahmins decided to pay a visit to Panchal. Meanwhile, Pandavas needed to flee from the village as they stayed there for a while. They found Swayamvara ceremony as an excuse to flee to another village. Hence, they decided to go with other Brahmins to Panchal. As they reached Panchal, Kunti Devi was made to stay in a potter's house and Pandavas left to see the ceremony. Many dignitaries who hoped to win her hand were present. Duryodhana was present along with Karna. Sri Krishna and his brother Balram were also present there. Kings of Kosala, Madra and Chevi were also present in the Swayamvara. At last, but not the least, the Pandavas were also present at the Swayamvara, but in the guise of Brahmins. Nobody knew that they were alive and participating in this event. Draupadi's father, Drupad, was fond of Arjuna and secretly hoped that Arjuna will win her daughter's hand. Thus, he set forth a condition which was impossible for everyone except Arjuna to fulfill. The challenge was to pierce the eye of a revolving fish which was erected on a pole by looking at the reflection in a water-filled vessel. The bow was a heavy one and very few could lift it. One by one, the kings came and tried to lift the bow, but none of them were able to do so. Putting the arrow on the bow was a tough task. Duryodhana and Dushasana also failed to lift the bow. Thus, to defend the honor of Hastinapur, Karna decided to take part in the competition. Karna, arguably the best archer along with Arjuna, could lift the bow easily. It appeared that he would achieve the condition which Drupada set for. Drupada and his son were alarmed, fearing he might succeed and claim the bride. Suddenly, Draupadi intervened, for she would not have the son of a charioteer for her lord. She said speakingly loudly, "I am a king's daughter and will not wed with the base born." Thus, Karna left the competition without having to try. As the day passed and kings failed, it appeared that no one could fulfill the conditions set forth by Drupada. A gloom was descending over the court. Just when it looked as if nobody could fulfill the target, Arjuna, clad in the guise of Brahmin, rose. All kings thought that how a weak-looking Brahmin can achieve the feat when all the kings have failed. But Arjuna took the permission of Drishtadyumna and confidently walked towards the target. Some ridiculed his efforts, while some said that the Brahmin knows best his own skill. He would not go forward if he were not sure of success. An aged priest endeavored to restrain Arjuna lest he should by his failure being ridiculed upon the Brahmins, but the hero would not be thwarted. He strode forward like to a stately elephant and bared his broad shoulders and ample chest. He was nimble as a lion and calm and self-possessed. When the reality dawned over the kings, they felt humiliated that what they could not do, a weak Brahmin has achieved. Citing that Draupadi should be married to warrior-class Kshatriya, they attacked the humble Brahmin. Here he lifted the bow, he walked round it, then he addressed a prayer to the gods. He stood up unmoved and serene as a mountain peak, and he bent the bow and fixed an arrow on it. The young Brahmin pierced the target. All eyes watched him. He drew the cord and the arrow flew upwards with a hissing sound. It hit the target eye, and the golden fish fell over and clashed upon the ground. Like distant thunder arose the plaudits of the multitude. Hundreds of Brahmins shouted in ecstasy and waved their scarfs. 1,000 trumpets clamored in triumph, and the drums were beaten loud. Draupadi was overjoyed and garlanded Arjuna. The heart of Draupadi was filled with joy, and smilingly coyly she advanced towards Arjuna and flung the golden bridal garland over his shoulders. Celestial blossoms fluttered, descending through the air, and the sound of celestial music was heard. Drupada is also visibly pleased. Finally, the objective of having Draupadi Swayamvara was fulfilled. Pandavas rose in unison. As Arjuna was attacked, Bhima gave him company with an uprooted tree. Yudhishthira and the younger brothers were soon helping them, and the Brahmins also came forward to give their aid, and they defeated the kings. Drishtadyumna, Draupadi's brother, followed them to find out who the Brahmin was. When they reached their hut, the Pandavas called out to their mother Kunti, "Look, mother, what we have brought." Kunti replied from inside her, "Share it among yourselves," thinking they had brought food. When she saw the bride and was told that she was Arjuna's wife, Kunti was very unhappy at what she has seen. When she saw the bride and was told that she was Arjuna's wife, Kunti was very unhappy at what she had seen. As a custom, the Pandavas would have to obey every word that she said. Draupadi would have to become the wife of all 5 brothers. Just then, Krishna came to their hut. He told Kunti, in her previous life, Draupadi had worshipped Shiva to get a husband with certain qualities. So, Lord Shiva had given her a boon which has resulted in her having 5 husbands. On hearing this, Kunti felt satisfied and Draupadi became the witness. On hearing this, Kunti felt satisfied and Draupadi became the wife of all Pandavas. Drishtadyumna, who had followed them, heard all this. He went back to his father Drupada and said, "I have good news for you. The brave Brahmin who married Draupadi was none other than the great Arjuna." Drupada was delighted to hear this. But when he came to know that Draupadi was to be the wife of all the 5 Pandavas, he was sad because this was against the law. At that time, sage Vyasa came there. He told Drupada, though such a marriage is not permitted in the holy scriptures, this particular marriage is a result of a boon by Shiva himself, so it is not against the law. Satisfied, Drupada arranged for a reception at the palace. The Pandavas were invited and the wedding between the Pandavas and Draupadi was performed with great splendor.
Om Shri Sai Ram. Chapter 17. When the news about the Swayamvar reached Hastinapur, Vidura was very happy about it. He advised Dhritarashtra to forget the past and accept Pandavas to Hastinapur as his own sons. Duryodhan, Shakuni and Karn were unhappy about it and expressed disinterest. Even then, after listening to Bhishmacharya's advice, Dhritarashtra agreed and gave a warm welcome to Pandavas, Kunti and Panchali. He also decided to give them half of the kingdom. As there was difference of opinion between Kauravas and Pandavas decided to renovate the old and degraded city of Khandavaprastha. They renovated it and made it like a heaven. It was named Indraprastha. The Pandavas, along with Draupadi, lived and ruled the country with righteousness and truth for 33 long years.
Om Shri Sai Ram. In today's chapter, we will see the story of a great warrior whose name was Jarasandha. He ruled the kingdom of Magadha. How he was born and how he attained this name. Let's see this in this chapter. There was a king named Brihadradhan in the kingdom of Magadha. He married the twin daughters of king of Kashi. Even though he was living a happy and peaceful life with his queens, he had one sorrow in his mind. there was no heir for his dynasty. So he decided to leave the palace and go to the forest. He, along with his wives, went to the forest to perform penance. There, he happened to see a sage named Kaushika. The king shared his grief with the sage and after listening to his story, gave him a mango. The sage blessed him and said if his wives consumed this mango, they would conceive a baby. The king, who never used to show any discrimination towards his wives, cut the mango into 2 exactly equal parts. The sage's blessing became true and the queens became pregnant soon. But things were not completely all right. Each of them gave birth to one half of a child. The king ordered the servants to abandon both these halves into the forest. A diviness named Jara found these 2 halves and she joined them. To her surprise, they merged to form a whole child. She returned the child to the king. As the child was joined by Jara, the king named the child Jarasandha. The child grew to become a strong and healthy warrior, but there was a small disadvantage for its body. If true force was applied, his body would tear apart. Later on, this technique was used to kill Jarasandha. Jai Sai Ram.
Om Shri Sai Ram. Jarasandha, with his strong and powerful body, could defeat many renowned kings and make them his prisoners. Defeating Jarasandha was now a very big question in front of everyone. During that time, in Indraprastha, Pandavas, with all their glory, were ruling their kingdom. Yudhishthira was advised by his ministers to conduct an Ashwamedha Yajna to attain the emperorship. He approached Bhagwan Sri Krishna for advice. After knowing Yudhishthira's wish, Krishna came to visit Indraprastha. Krishna gave his opinion that it is a good decision to conduct Rajasuya. Bhima and Arjuna also supported Krishna's views and extended their whole cooperation for conducting this. For this, they have to defeat many kings and bring those kingdoms under Pandava's rule. It is then they understood the fact that Jarasandha had already defeated many kings and had imprisoned them. So they understood that by defeating Jarasandha, they can take control over a large number of kingdoms. As per Krishna's instruction, Bhima, Arjuna and Krishna, disguising as Brahmins, went to the palace of Jarasandha. From their mannerisms and behavior, Jarasandha could sense that they were not Brahmins. So Krishna asked Jarasandha to get ready for a one-to-one fight with who is equal in strength to him among the 3 of them. So Jarasandha chose to fight with Bhima. Both of them were equally strong, and the fight continued for 13 long days. On the 14th day, Bhima could sense that Jarasandha was tired. He pushed him to the floor and tore apart his body, vertically dividing it by separating the legs. But as soon as they were placed together, it rejoined. In order to help Bhima with a solution, Krishna took a hay stick and tore it vertically and threw both the pieces into two different directions. Bhima understood this clue and he tore apart Jarasandha's body and threw it in opposite directions with the orientation of head and leg different in the two halves. This time the body could not rejoin and Jarasandha was killed. Thus, all the kings who were imprisoned by Jarasandha were released and the rule of these kingdoms was taken up by the Pandavas. Bhagavan Sri Krishna was always there to guide Pandavas and show them the right path. Om Shri Sai Ram, Chapter 20. Yudhishthira started Rajasuya Yajna after the assassination of Jarasandha. Accepting Yudhishthira's supremacy, several kings participated in this yajna. During Rajasuya Yajna, it's a normal practice to select one king who is virtuous and liked by everyone from the invited guests to perform Agra Puja. Bhishma told without hesitation that Sri Krishna is the most eligible person for the Agra Puja. Yudhishthira also agreed with this. However, shady king Shishupala strongly opposed giving respect to Sri Krishna, arguing that only evil can insult good. Shishupala abused Sri Krishna, narrating all the stories starting from Sri Krishna's birth, which he had understood in his own ways. Shishupala affronted Bhishma and Pandavas also and left from the yajna. Along with Shishupala, some of the other invited kings also left the yajna. Even after leaving from there, they continued to abuse Sri Krishna. Things started moving to a war phase. Finally, Sri Krishna killed Shishupala. Om Shri Sai Ram, Chapter 21. After Rajasuya Yajna, priests, gurus and other kings left. Sage Vyasa blessed Yudhishthira. Negative signs indicated that Pandavas may have to suffer troubles and they must undergo immense difficulties in the coming 13 years. At the end, there would be a huge conflict between Pandavas on one side and Kauravas on the other side, and in that, the Kshatriya clan will be mostly destroyed. Sage Vyasa's long vision indicated that no one could resist this destiny. At this juncture, Yudhishthira took an oath that in the coming 13 years, he will not talk rudely to his brothers or other relatives, stay away from all competitions, and will not allow anger to sprout, which is the source of all hatred. The superiority and reputation of Pandavas made Duryodhana jealous. Duryodhana's uncle Shakuni inquired the reasons for the distress of Duryodhana. Duryodhana told to Shakuni that he will not get peace of mind until Pandavas are defeated in a battle and all their wealth are destroyed. Shakuni did not support this straight path. He said that it is dangerous to enter a battle with Pandavas and there are other ways to get the things done. He said that they should use the good nature of Yudhishthira against him. Shakuni told Duryodhana to invite Yudhishthira to play the game of dice, which is permitted by the kings. As Yudhishthira is interested in this game, he will accept the invitation to play. During the game, Shakuni will play for Duryodhana and through betrayal, Yudhishthira can be defeated without any bloodshed and all wealth, country and everything possessed by Pandavas can be captured. Thus, Shakuni entered the arena as a sign for the start of Pandava's bad times. Jai Sai Ram. Om Shri Sai Ram. Chapter 22. Bringing the righteous Yudhishthira to Hastinapur was a prime mission of Shakuni and Duryodhana. For this, they met King Dhritarashtra and started convincing him in various ways. Aware of the downside of dice game, Dhritarashtra warned that the game may cause immense disaster. However, the affection towards his son made Dhritarashtra agree for this game. Vidura was assigned the task of inviting Yudhishthira to Hastinapur to play the game of dice. Vidura went to Indraprastha with a very heavy heart to invite Yudhishthira. Although Yudhishthira was fully aware of the flaws of the dice game, he accepted the invitation for 3 reasons. The prime reason is Yudhishthira's interest in the dice game. Secondly, Yudhishthira believed that declining the invitation to play the dice game is against the prevailing etiquette for a Kshatriya. Finally, Yudhishthira considered refusing the invitation as a disrespect to King Dhritarashtra. So, Yudhishthira accepted the invitation and went to Hastinapur along with his brothers and wife. Yudhishthira tried to avoid the dice game, but his effort went in vain. Duryodhana being the opponent, Dharmaputra believed that it is easy to win the game. But before the outset of the game itself, Kauravas had made a deception plan against Yudhishthira. Yudhishthira learned that on behalf of Duryodhana, his uncle Shakuni will be playing the dice game. Although Yudhishthira raised his concern mentioning that this is not the right way, he was not able to withstand against the sarcasm of Kauravas. The dice game was the outset of deception on Pandavas and their country Indraprastha. Om Shri Sai Ram. Chapter 23. The game of dice between Shakuni and Yudhishthira began in the assembly hall where the preceptors like Bhishma, Vidura, the father of Kauravas Dhritarashtra, and women of the inner chambers had gathered. Every time Shakuni rolled his dice, he won as if he was using his magic dice. Yudhishthira bet his wealth and kingdom and he lost all of them. As they proceeded, he kept his brothers and himself as wages. Finally, the crooked Shakuni reminded Yudhishthira of Panchali. In the desperate situation, Yudhishthira kept his wife too at stake. The beginning of Kaurava's destruction began at this moment. Duryodhana commanded to his charioteer Pratikarmi to fetch Panchali to the hall. Vidura argued that Yudhishthira, being a slave, had no right to wager Panchali. But the arrogant Duryodhana did not pay heed to it. Placing the same argument, Panchali disagreed to come to the hall. Vikarna, another son of Dhritarashtra, warned that if they humiliate Panchali, it would result in the end of Kaurava clan. Ignoring all these, Duryodhana's brother Dushasana caught Panchali by her hair and dragged her to the assembly hall. When Dushasana tried to disrobe her, she pleaded with all elders who were present in the hall to save her from humiliation. But no one spoke up for her. Understanding that even her husbands could not save her, she loudly cried to Lord Krishna, the Lord of universe, to protect her. Her devotion to the Lord and complete surrender to Him received the Lord's immediate attention. How can the Lord be deaf to the sincere call of His dear devotee? Lo and behold, immeasurable measures of silk ropes started flowing from the palaces of Dwaraka, covering Panchali, thus defeating the evil designs of Dushasana.
Mahabharata
The more he pulled out a sari, the more it stretched. Finally, he was exhausted and collapsed on the floor. Witnessing the ever-compassionate Lord Krishna's miracle, the preceptors and the women of the inner chamber shed tears of devotion. Enraged Bhimasena took a vow that he would avenge for the disgrace done to Panchali by killing Dushasana before his death. This moment, Dhritarashtra realized the seriousness of the situation. He apologized to Yudhishthira for all that happened and declared that whatever was lost in the game of dice was returned to him. Though Pandavas returned to Indraprastha, Duryodhana and his close associates kept plotting against them. As a part of the evil plot, Yudhishthira was again brought to Hastinapur to play the dice game. Here again, he lost the bet and had to surrender all his wealth and kingdom to Kauravas. As per the condition laid out by Duryodhana, the Pandavas were forced to 12 years exile, followed by a year living incognito to avoid 12 years of exile. Disgraced Pandavas started for their exile to the forest with Panchali.
Om Shri Sai Ram. Dhritarashtra disturbed. Robbed of their kingdom and wealth, Pandavas, along with Panchali, left Hastinapura. The people of the kingdom witnessed this tragic event with tearful eyes. Vidura explained to Dhritarashtra how sage Daumya had left the city walking in front of Pandavas, chanting Yamadharma Sukta from Samaveda. While they were talking about this, the great sage Narada appeared on the scene. He forewarned that within 14 years, Kauravas will have to face the severe consequences of their evil actions. Listening to the prophecy, Duryodhana became restless. Overcome with fear, Duryodhana approached Dronacharya and requested him never to forsake them. As it was his duty to serve Kauravas, Dronacharya promised that he would not leave them. But he openly told Duryodhana that Pandavas will have the final victory. Having lost his peace of mind, Dhritarashtra shared his sorrow with Vidura. However, when Vidura spoke in favor of Pandavas, Dhritarashtra was enraged and ordered him to join them. Later, he repented for that, and with Sanjaya's intervention, Vidura was brought back. After meeting Pandavas at Kamika forest, sage Maitreya went straight to Hastinapura. He advised Duryodhana to live in harmony with Pandavas. The egoistic Duryodhana slapped his left thigh and insulted the sage by evidently showing that he did not care for the sage's advice. Maitreya got very angry and cursed Duryodhana by saying, "Bhimasena will break your thigh and kill you." Hearing this, Dhritarashtra panicked and fell at the sage's feet and apologized for the mistake. But Maitreya departed saying that as Kauravas were not ready to patch up with the Pandavas, the curse would definitely have its effect. Jai Sai Ram.
Om Shri Sai Ram. Chapter 25. In Lord Krishna's absence, he had entrusted the power of defense of Dwaraka in the hands of the old Ugrasena. Taking advantage of the situation, Shishupala's bosom friend Shalva attacked Dwaraka to avenge the death of his friend. He caused heavy destruction to the city. It was during this time the tragic event of Pandava's exile happened in Hastinapura. Shri Krishna came to know about this only after the fierce battle with Shalva. Immediately, he went to meet Pandavas accompanied by their royal friends. There, Krishna came to know about the deceitful gambling match that took place in Hastinapura. When the compassionate Lord heard the grief-stricken Draupadi weeping, "O Lord, even you have given us up." Lord Krishna pacified her and took this vow: "O princess, wipe your tears. I'll avenge all who have offended you. The heaven may fall, Mount Himalaya may crack, the earth may shatter into pieces, the ocean may get dry, but my words will never prove to be futile."
परित्राणाय साधूनां विनाशाय च दुष्कृतां धर्म संस्थापनार्थाय संभवामि युगे युगे।
समस्त लोक सुखिनो भवन्तु।
समस्त लोका सुखिनो भवन्तु।
समस्त लोक सुखिनो भवन्तु।